All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Hat.
And I'm Eric.
And I am Stan.
And today we are going to be talking about the recent, very exciting 30th anniversary announcement for Fire Emblem, specifically Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light limited digital release. So we're going to be touching on the release. We're going to be touching on some of the controversy surrounding that with the limited release. And then also people are excited this might mean other Fire Emblem games might get translated or other games in general. So this is an exciting time. We're going to talk about it. Then we're going to transition into our thoughts on the Monster Hunter film coming out with Mila Jovovich. So Stan loves it. He's very, very excited to talk about this film. I'm thinking, I think you were actually talking like 2001 Space Odyssey. It kind of reminded you a lot of, you know, just some of the philosophical content in that, right, Stan?
Sure.
Yeah, so he's going to just really break down some of the deep messaging going on in the trailer for this movie. Of course, me and Eric didn't like it, so, you know, but Stan will be the odd man out on that. He loved it. And then we're going to talk about why video game movies generally are bad. Not all video game movies, but I feel pretty safe saying all video game movies are generally pretty bad, except maybe like one. So should be a pretty good discussion, but let's go ahead and jump into our very first topic here. Fire Emblem 30th anniversary. So we had a trailer that announced, right? And it got shown off by Nintendo, and they showed the very first Fire Emblem game, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, and it's going to be released on the Nintendo Switch with an official English translation. This is a big deal because the game has never come out in English, obviously. And so a lot of people are excited to play it. They don't have to play an emulated version where it's got like a fan translation. This will be, you know, a full localization of the game. So people are really excited about that. And it's only going to be $5.99 for a digital release. Now there is a $49.99 special edition, 30th anniversary edition. That's going to be available as well. I went ahead and pre-ordered that, and I know, Eric, you said you did as well, correct?
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah.
That just the stuff I see in there, like the NES box and such, I had to.
Yeah, that's what, like, I'm not even that big of a Fire Emblem fan, but when I saw that anniversary edition, and I saw the price for $50, I was like, dude, that looks awesome. I need to have that. And
yeah, I'm slightly disappointed it doesn't come with a physical cartridge. It still comes with a download code. But all the stuff that comes with it is just greatly outweighs any negative aspect I have for it.
Yeah, that's definitely the negative. No physical, but it's okay. It's okay. We're gonna live through it because there's some other cool stuff with it. So it's coming out on December 4th, 2020. The original Japanese release date was April 20th, 1990. So it's been a while. It's been a while. And so this is very, very exciting. And there's been some other Fire Emblem games too that have not come over with an official translation yet. So Fire Emblem Gaiden on the NES, then Mystery of the Emblem, A Genealogy of the Holy War, and Thracia 776. I think I said that correctly. And then on the Game Boy Advance, there was the Binding Blade. So there's a lot of games that still need to come over. So people are really hoping that this is going to be an indication of future things to come. But before we jump into that, let's first kind of smash out some of this controversy here, or just give our thoughts on this. People are very unhappy right now about Nintendo, most recently with the Mario collection, right? The anniversary collection, where it's a limited release. And now we're having a similar thing. Granted, this is only $5 or $6. But people are like, hey, it's digital. Why are you having a limited release? It's only going to be available till like March 31st, I believe, or something like that. So why are you doing this? Why are you making people feel like they need to buy it right now if they don't want to? If it's a digital release, people want it to just be available and to be able to just play it. So, you know, whenever they want, they don't want to feel pressured into buying something. So What do you guys think about that? Because
Well, I can tell you this: I'm no businessman, but I just don't see the benefit. This seems like such a short term way of getting people to buy your game instead of just leaving it in the store and just let the long term sales do their job. I mean, with Mario in particular, that set is already like appealing enough that a lot of people are going to come in and buy it. And again, I don't know why they need to do a scare tactic. A lot of people compare this to the Disney Vault, where they release a physical version of their movies for a limited time. Then they'll have that commercial. It's like, get it right now, or I'll go right back into the Disney Vault. I remember seeing that all the time as a kid,
Yeah.
like when they released the VHS tapes, and it only really comes off as a scare tactic to me. You have to buy it now, or you're not going to have it type of deal. And apparently, Nintendo thinks highly of themselves now to the point where they can do something like that. Now I can understand for like physical copies,
Yeah.
like you can only get physical copies for a limited time, but the digital is always going to be up. I get that. It's saving on manufacturer costs and such, but there really isn't a point of taking the digital version down.
yeah,
I just don't see it.
I totally agree with you. I think that if you wanted to make the most compelling positive case for it, and I don't agree with this at all, but you could say that Nintendo just wants to make it feel special or like a big event. So that's why it's a timed exclusive. But I totally agree with you. It's digital. Just let people buy it. But I can't help but think that perhaps this is just Nintendo testing the water with trying to combat the used game market. Now I know this is a digital version, but I think that they're just seeing if we'll accept this type of thing with future releases. Because if you think about it, Breath of the Wild, they're still selling that for near full price. You can go to like eBay and just get used for like $35, and they're not making any money off that sale. So I think that they looked at like the 30th anniversary of Mario and they said, you know what? We can release this game and we're going to have it as a timed release, including digital. And then after March, you're not going to be able to buy it anymore. And that's going to keep the used price of the game on the used market up high because it's not available anymore, right? So then next year they'll do it again. They'll just release it again. And I think they realized like 80% of their sales come in the first 6 months. So they're just creating this frenzy about, oh, I have to buy it now or else I'll have to buy it used. And it's just keeping the price of these games at full price for however long they want to drag this out. And it just doesn't make me feel good about buying it when I feel like there's some kind of ulterior motive behind it.
Yeah, on top of that, like with Fire Emblem in particular, why that?
Yeah.
Like a small team took their time to localize the game. People have been asking for years to get like original NES versions of these games. They want to play like the original genuine version of it, and they take the time to localize it. Then they're like, "Oh, well, you can only get it for a few months." It's like if I was a developer and I knew I was like, "Oh, someone can only enjoy my content for 3 to 4 months." I think I'd be probably a little angry. But here's the interesting thing, though. This isn't actually the first time Nintendo has done this. There has been a history of limited release. One I can think of in particular was for Zelda's 30th anniversary, I believe. I think, or 25th anniversary, I think. They released a DS version of Four Swords, Zelda Four Swords, and you could download it, and I think it was free to download.
Right.
And you could play the GBA Four Swords game on the DS with other people without dealing with all the wired connections from the original Game Boy Advance version. And it was really cool. But then that was only a few months they allowed it to be up and they took it down. And I told myself, I don't understand why. I mean, obviously the DS shop is gone now.
Yeah.
Well,
But I still don't see what the point was of just making a limited release.
I think that, Nintendo is kind of known for kind of trying to tweak the market a little bit, right? And I think that they view this, that's a good case that you brought up, Eric. And maybe that was just like a unique case with like a unique feature. But I think in their mind, they think like, how can we create value, right? Because they're worried about branding. They want people to feel special. They want their products to feel special. And when they create artificial shortages for something like the NES Mini, and someone finally gets one, it feels that much more special that they got something that's unique and hard to get. And it just creates a feeling of quality about it, that you got something that like everyone wanted, right? And so I think that they're thinking, how can we do this with some of our games and some of these things, like something people have wanted for years, which is a translation to this game. Oh, well, we're going to have a limited release to it. So that way, when you get it, you're going to feel special. Like you got in early, you got the game, you have something unique. But
Who cares?
Yeah, it's just, it's anti-consumer to do it with a digital version. I mean, people are bringing up that, it's not really limited because we all know that this is going to come later down the road. Like they'll just let us buy it. And if that's the case, I almost find this more egregious, because then they're just scaring people by lying into buying their game. Like, oh, you can only buy it now, but secretly they know like a year from now, they'll just release it again. Like so you're just lying to everyone to buy it,
Yeah.
but I'm still going to buy it. I mean, I pre-ordered the,
I saw 5 copies of Mario All-Star, the 3D All-Stars at Walmart the other night.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a hard game to find, physical or digital.
After March, though, it'll probably, I guess probably it'll take a while for those to be out of circulation. But yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it's very anti-consumer, especially with the digital version. If, like Eric mentioned, the Disney Vault days with the DVD and the VHS releases, in a non-digital marketplace, that at least makes some degree of business sense, because Disney can know, like, okay, we're gonna order X number of DVDs, right? And then we're gonna release them for a limited time. And then because of the artificial shortage we've created, we know that each one has a very high probability of selling for full price, right? Not like being discounted at the Walmart like 3 weeks later.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But with a digital version, it just reeks of short-term profit motive thinking. Like there's no it's not costing you extra money, right? You don't have to print a digital version of the game. There's no materials involved. There's just server space at the most, right? To keep the game up on the store. So,
well, I think that's what they're doing though. They're testing it with something small like this, where they're going to see, okay, we'll have it available for X amount of months, and then we're going to take it away, and we're going to look at sales during that period and see how high it was, and then we're going to introduce it again next holiday or something like that.
Yeah,
and then it's just everyone that missed out on it's going to jump in on it, and they're going to be like, dude, if you quantify how much we expected to sell if we just left it available, as opposed to just doing these like limited releases, it's like twice as many copies,
Yeah, and it takes away one of the advantages of having a digital copy of a game, which is like preservation of the game, right? There's like the NES, the game that's coming out, Shadow Dragon and the Sword of Light. There's probably many Japanese people who want to buy it just because they don't have their NES anymore, so they don't have access to the game. So, and for us, we never even got the game, right? So, like, having a digital copy of a game, whether you own the original or not, is a way that you can know, like, I'll be able to come back to this game in the future, however many years, as long as the hardware I bought it on is still working, But then a limited digital release is kind of like, they're taking advantage of that, saying like, oh, if you want to make sure you have a copy of this, for the future, you have to buy it now or never, and it's kind of very
Here's the situation I hate is, let's say somewhere down the line, say like a year from now, Fire Emblem Three Houses is on sale. It's like $40 instead of $60. And someone's like, "Oh, that's a bargain. I've never played a Fire Emblem game before." They play Three Houses, they fall in love with the series, and they're like, "Wow, I really want to play more Fire Emblem games. I want to see where it started." Well,
You can't get any.
let's assume this person doesn't know about emulation. Like he sees that people have the first Fire Emblem game on their Switch. They're like, "Oh man, I want to play that," and they go and it's not there. It's like, why is it not there anymore? Because Nintendo decided it needed to be a limited time game, and that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That's kind of demotivating, to be honest.
Yeah, and like Nintendo goes after all these ROM sites, right? Like legally, which is their right to do because they're, giving away their properties, but they're going to go after these ROM sites for having these games up. Sometimes games that were never translated, right? And then they do translate a game, but they're like, "Oh, you have 3 months to buy it." Right? And then it's going to go away. But then it's conflicting. On the other hand, they're still going to be going after these ROM sites, which serve a purpose of preserving these games digitally.
Yeah, doing stuff like this is basic. It's almost forcing people to pirate this stuff. Like when you take away Mario and Fire Emblem, guess what? Someone's going to make a ROM of them, and then people are going to be more inclined to pirate their Switch. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. Don't ever mod your Switch in any way.
It's just the correct thing to
do. But what I'm saying is this motivates people more than ever to pirate your products when you take it away from them. Fire Emblem for $5.99 being a fully translated game coming out for the first time for $6, I think that's a good deal.
Yeah,
$6 is a good deal. They went out of their way to translate it and bring it here. They should profit some from it, of course. And they took the time to get 3 games that were not on the Switch for Mario together, even though they're kind of more emulated than actually ported over. But still, people took the time to get that stuff on there. I understand the price point and everything, but you take it away, what is stopping people from creating ROMs from them and motivating themselves to hack into your device?
Yeah, like I don't have a lot of sympathy for Nintendo once it's gone. Like once it's up there, right? If people are pirating it when it's available for $6, then that's kind of like assuming you have a Switch, $6 is very reasonable. But then once they take it away, then it's no longer available for purchase. I don't really have a lot of sympathy for Nintendo if people choose to acquire it in a different way after that,
Yeah, it's one thing if it's going from if you're not transferring it from the Switch to whatever their next console is and you don't bring it over. But this is like game hostage. It's not game preservation. It's holding a game hostage after a few months when all companies should be striving to find ways to create preservation for their games so they don't get lost in time. This is why people are creating ROMs and such like that. I mean, we know other reasons they are, but there are people who have these ROMs and keep them genuinely to make sure that our history stays intact. And I think Nintendo is doing more damage than good and their line of preservation. They're certainly not the worst, but Nintendo does not. I mean, yeah, they're pretty much borderline worse at this. I'll admit it.
They're pretty bad because if you remember, they were caught downloading a ROM of, I think it was Super Mario, from like a website. Like this was a fan-made ROM because you could check in the coding and there was some signatures there that indicated it was from a particular person that distributed it, right? And then they sold that ROM, like because they lost the code to the original Mario, and it was easier just to pull the ROM than to try to like remake the game. And so that's the company we're dealing with here, where they'll sell you the ROM, but they'll pull it off somebody's website, and then they'll sue the website.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they did that with they found it in Super Mario Bros. On the Wii Virtual Console one.
Yeah,
That's what it
They
was.
had
Yeah.
the same emulation coding
yeah.
as the one on the website. Yeah. Wow. Mm.
But like to kind of basically where I'm at with this is, and I agree with you all that the emulation component, yeah, once if it's not around, if you're not providing a copy of this game and people want to emulate the game, that's on them. I mean that's, and I don't even think it's. I mean, obviously there's a legal component, there's a legal issue there that is, you know, worth consideration. But as far as like an ethical consideration, I don't have any qualms about it. However, I just wish that Nintendo would be more transparent about what they plan on doing, because I would just like to have all the information, because I have to imagine that they might just be limiting this release to gain more sales, but it's also a $6 game. How much money are they making off this? Right?
Yeah.
They might be looking in the long game to putting this on their online console in the future. And maybe they're testing this component out to see, or this limited release, whatever you want to call it, strategy out to see if that might gain excitement for their online service later down the road, when they're like, oh yeah, you remember that game that was only available for X amount of months? Now you can sign up for $2.99 a month and you can stream it on our online console. And it's not the same as owning the game and being able to play it offline and everything like that. But I mean, you'll be able to play it on there if you want to be part of Nintendo's online service, because that is something they're trying to build. And I'm okay if that's their plan, if that's what they want to do. I'm not okay, but that's better. But I just wish they would be
More transparent.
yeah, and just
Like,
say,
no,
hey, it's available from X this month to this month. If you want to just flat out own it, $6. Here you go. You can do it from till then. After that, if you want to play it, it's on the online console. Because they put work in the translating. I can't imagine they're just going to like let it sit there and not do anything with it in the future, you know? So I have to imagine that that's what they're doing, but it's Nintendo. So
I love Nintendo. They make my favorite games, but I don't think they're above doing shady crap like this.
Yeah.
And I think people should let them know and share their criticism and say something like this is not okay. It's very anti-consumer, and people already don't like companies like Disney that does it, even if it works. So I don't see why you would fare any better from than this tactics. The only people I see benefiting from this is from Nintendo and not the consumer.
yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. On a separate note, though, how do you guys feel about the fact that this game's being translated? A lot of people feel this is just a sign of future games being translated, that like this is going to be a new priority for Nintendo and you know, other companies. What do you guys think about that? Do you think this is just a one-off thing, or is this are we going to see a lot more of this in the future?
I think we'll see more of it in the future if this is successful. I know a lot of people are clamoring for Mother 3 to get translated through the Treehouse.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's different reasons why Mother 3 isn't coming over here, which we've talked about previously.
Right.
But you know, long story short, there's certain content in there that may not be appropriate for West Side, or Nintendo believes may not be appropriate for West Side. But anyways, I mean that is a potential thing they could translate. Like Hat mentioned earlier, there are other Fire Emblem games that have yet to be translated and could potentially come over if this one's successful. Fire Emblem has become a very big series here in the West over the years, and I wouldn't be surprised if these came in. I mean, you can technically, I mean, in terms of like Fire Emblem, the one coming out in December, and Gaiden, there are technically remakes for them already that you can buy West Side. Shadow Dragon
on the
for the
DS,
DS,
right? Yeah.
is a remake of the first one, and then Shadows of Valentia for the 3DS is another one, but they are expensive now because, like we stated in our previous episode that you can watch, it's really hard to find those games unless they're emulated.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be really cool if the Treehouse got their hands on these other Fire Emblem titles and started going. I can't think on top of my head though, games that we haven't received from Nintendo that is in high demand from people. I don't know if you guys know anything on top of your head.
Well, I mean, yeah, Mother 3 is the one that, because I know the fan base is very passionate about that one and these Fire Emblem games. Yeah.
Yeah. I would have to give it some more thought, but to look at it in like a bigger scope, I know that just recently there's been a lot of games that have been coming over. I mean, we just got, and not Nintendo games, but from other companies, it seems like the trendy thing to do. And so, I mean, we just got the Star Ocean from Enix, right? We got Star Ocean, the first game. Well, that was already re-released, so that doesn't count. But we had Trials of Mana. That was a big release. And so I'm sure that we're going to see more of this in the future. But I think that this is just, I think people are reading into this a little bit too much, because I think Nintendo just knew that they had a dry year this year and they needed stuff to get people excited. And this is just one of those things. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of translated games or re-releases in the year that Breath of the Wild 2 comes out or the next Xenoblade comes out. Like, you know, because eventually we're going to get to, a lot of people think 2021, or we're just going to have a plethora of games come out like we did for 2017 and 2018 with the Switch, where it was just, you know, every 2 months, like a 9 out of 10 game was coming out. And if we have another year like that, I think you're going to see a decrease in games like this being translated. And then even re-releases, like this year we had, you know, Xenoblade Chronicles, which was a re-release. We had the Mario games, which was a re-release. Those are just easier to port over rather than to come out with a new game, right? Made from the ground up. So I think that's just kind of why we have this going on right now anyways.
To add to your point, Zelda 35th anniversary is coming 2021. So they might do something similar with Mario and release some of the older games like the N64 titles, or even potentially port over the HD versions of Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, or do the long rumored Skyward Sword for Switch type of deal.
I predict them releasing a cardboard sword that has a little screen in it, and it's going to have all the Zelda games in it, but you have to like whack around your living room in order to like attack enemies. No. Yeah, and it's going to piss everyone off because they just want to play it on their Switch.
Now, they did make a Zelda Game & Watch way back then.
Yeah, I just know, but they're just going to do something like they're going to implement it in a way that nobody wants, you know. But anyways.
Yeah. In regards to in Fire Emblem, and if we're going to see more of them, I think the only way is if this release is like a big success for the company, right? Like if 100,000 people download the game for $6.99, then Nintendo will probably take a look at that and be like, okay, there's a demand there. We can do the same thing with the next game, like in the summer, you know, like if this one goes away in March, we can translate Fire Emblem Gaiden and kind of have a limited release for that from like June to September, you know, and the trend will continue until the sales drop off, you know. But it kind of all hinges on this first game, and if it's a big enough success in their eyes, because it's a business at the end of the day. So they're not gonna do it unless it shows a good profit for the company.
I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable that they're going to come over eventually. I mean, eventually it's going to happen, and we're just talking about in the near future, right? I'm sure if you fast forward 50 years from now and look back, at some point they'll have done it, all those games, because we're going to hit dry years like this, and they'll have an opportunity. But in the near future is more what we're talking about.
I got a quick question for both of you.
Okay.
Do you think that modern Fire Emblem players are going to like this game? It is the first title.
I've never played it.
Now, here's the thing. They did add a rewind feature to the game. So if one of your party members dies, instead of adding a casual mode, which I doubt they did, you can rewind back to the point, before he died and try to make a different move, which actually is something I kind of wish the direction they went in instead of a casual mode. But I understand the appeal of casual mode, so I'm not going to knock on it. But I thought it would be a better idea to make a feature to let you properly rewind, similar to like Tactics Ogre in the PSP, that lets you greatly rewind the fight to a point and lets you retry a different tactic.
Right.
Like, it doesn't take away the challenge from it, and it helps it be a lot more accessible. But that was just a small tangent.
No, I mean, I think
Fire Emblem.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the reception is going to be. I'm kind of baffled by some of the excitement around this game, just because you can emulate the game already, right? But there is a lot of excitement behind an official release because the localization's better. It's going to be cleaner. They actually hired someone. Then also, the colors are just going to look so much more vibrant than an emulated version. It's not going to look as bland and blurry. And it's also exciting that lots of people are going to be playing the same game at the same time, and you get to talk with them about it. So I think there'll be excitement there, and it's cool they're adding the rewind feature. So I guess we'll see. I bought it and I never played it, so I've got the collector's edition. So
yeah, same. And I assume it's going to be in 4x3.
Probably.
Already.
Yeah. I don't know. It's most likely, and I wouldn't expect anything less. So anyways, we'll see. I'm sure we'll see all the negative comments of people saying they don't have the NES side borders or something on the 4x3 game. And I just don't care about stuff like that. But
I just hope it's black border. That's it.
Yeah, that's all I want. So anyways, should be exciting. But let's take this opportunity to tell you all about our media partner, RPGFan.com. So they are a great source of RPG news, game reviews, soundtrack reviews. They have other RPG podcasts, Random Encounter, which is RPG news, discussions, opinions. They do that twice a month. And then Retro Encounter, which is more of a book club styled RPG podcast. They go through in-depth conversations on particular RPGs. I know Final Fantasy X-2 is coming up. So that should be a pretty fun discussion as well. Or I think it's coming up.
Boy.
I think it's one of the games that were in discussion. I don't know if I just let something out that I shouldn't have. Sorry, guys. Anyways, so most
a big long beep.
just everyone can speculate what I just said. Anyways, they'll get through it. So most recently, they did on their YouTube page the crosscode review finally for the Switch, and that was pretty fun. I actually recorded the footage for that, and it was a really, really good review. So definitely go check that out. They also have on their website Tales of Crestoria, which is the mobile game, then Trails of Cold Steel for the PS4, the most recent reviews. And guys, they've been doing reviews since the late 90s. So you can go back and read reviews from some of these all-time classics, and sometimes they'll have 5 people review the same game. So, if, Final Fantasy 9, if you just like that game, you can read multiple takes on it, or Shenmue, and that way you can get kind of a full idea of what multiple people think. It's really cool. So definitely go check them out. And if this is your first time checking us out, we do this on YouTube, and we do have an audio version. Links will be in the description. But our other topic that we do on a regular basis, or we're trying to do anyways, is we do in-depth spoiler game discussions. So just a quick rundown of what we've done in the past. We've had a discussion on Final Fantasy VII Remake, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII the original, Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 13, Xenoblade Chronicles, Dragon Quest 11 and 5, Kingdom Hearts 3, Knights of the Republic, Chrono Trigger, and upcoming is Super Mario or Mario RPG. So excited for that, and that should be coming out in the near future. So go check some of those out. But let's move on to our next topic here. This is Stan's favorite topic of the entire podcast. He's been begging us the whole week to talk about this. All right, so Monster Hunter trailer, or the Monster Hunter film, it's coming out on December 30th, 2020, and it's written and directed by one of the greatest directors of all time, Paul W.S. Anderson. You may know him as the director of Mortal Kombat in 1995 and many of the Resident Evil films. I think the only one he did not do was the third one, I believe. He just wrote that one. But
I thought you were going to say Yui Bowl for a second. I'm like, uh-oh.
No. But anyways, so it's starring his wife, Mila Jovovich, who's famous for the Resident Evil films, but I knew her before that from The Fifth Element, one of my favorite movies, and probably her best movie, I think. But this movie's also starring Tony Jaa, which I've never heard of, but
Oh, really?
yeah, is this
He's a famous like
Yeah.
martial arts movie. So people were saying he was going to be like the new Jackie Chan or like Jet Li when his career was kind of taking off.
what
and
happened?
like he just didn't really
He wasn't as good?
he is an excellent stuntman and martial artist for martial arts movies, but his acting just never really
Well, come on now.
reached
Jackie
the level.
Chan.
Jackie Chan is actually a pretty good actor.
Dude, he's
Like,
terrible.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's improved quite a bit. Like, I mean, of course,
I mean,
Okay.
his
Okay,
where
this
he
is a massive tangent. Let's move on.
okay.
we're about to start getting into a debate of Jackie Chan's former movies.
Okay.
But well, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
Tony Jaa's on this. Maybe this will be a resurrection for his career with him using his monster hunting experience. But Monster Hunter series director, I don't know how to say his name. How do you say his name? Kaname, Kaname, and producer Rizo. I'm not a big fan of these games, but anyways, the producer and director of the Monster Hunter series provided input into the film's depiction of the monsters. So you had some talent from the series coming in to direct some of the look of the monsters. And so, yeah, what do you guys think about this trailer? I mean, I probably, let me just go first because I have like the smallest amount of information to say on this. So I think since it's directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, and he directed most of the Resident Evil films, and which stars his wife Mila Jovovich, who also stars in Resident Evil films, and both of them are involved in this film. It's basically going to be Resident Evil minus the T virus, and they're going to trade out giant zombies for giant Monster Hunter monsters, and that's going to be the movie. So it's essentially Resident Evil. It's going to have really crappy cinematography. It's going to have bad dialogue. The plot won't make any sense. The fight sequences are going to be over the top, and they're all going to be in slow motion. And I can't wait to watch this and eat some popcorn because it's going to be a great time.
Man, my sentiments exactly. The movie looks absolutely horrible, and I totally want to see it. I want to be front row to see it. It's it looks like, I mean, just like the Resident Evil movies, there is enjoyment to be had if you just shut your brain off.
Yeah.
And that like there's a lot of stuff to just laugh to in those Resident Evil movies. It's just like it went from like somewhat scary in the first like one or two movies to just like screw it. Just keep leaking this for all it's worth. We know who our audience is. Let's just make these movies one by one. And I think this is no different. Now, granted, the monsters do look good, but like you just said, they were directed by people who work at Capcom.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I do appreciate about W.S. Anderson, besides the Resident Evil films, is like with the first Mortal Kombat movie, while that one is not exactly the greatest movie ever either, it's still a very fun movie, and I feel like there was an understanding of the source material,
Right.
to an extent, to get people into the movie. Now, the biggest
We're
mistake was
talking about
making
Mortal
it PG.
Kombat.
Yeah, making it PG-13, a game as bloody and violent as Mortal Kombat.
No,
But
it's family
anyways,
friendly.
I do think at least for this movie, I think there will be at least a understanding to an extent of what people like about Monster Hunter, and that is hunting the monsters. So the only thing they really need to do is just make sure they focus on the monster hunting and not focus on the stupid drama between the characters.
It's not a Monster Hunter movie, guys. Just know that it's not a Monster Hunter movie. It's just a monster movie that's called Monster Hunter, and that's all it's going to be. And you know,
yeah. Based on the trailer, I don't see them like focusing on like the monster hunting movie. It seems more like an action movie with Monster Hunter monsters in it, like Hat just said. Like when I think of Monster Hunter, I don't think of the American military like being transported through some magic storm into.
That's the first thing that comes to mind. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah,
isn't that canon?
No. Like when I saw that, I was like just thinking like whoever made this decision like thinks very little of the average moviegoer. Like they're thinking, I'm sure somebody pitched to them the idea of the entire movie takes place in the Monster Hunter world, right? And you'll follow this character who's like a monster hunter, like trying out.
Grew up there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then some movie studio executive along the way said, people won't connect with that character because they're like not American or they don't know anything about them or their culture. Put some Americans in the movie. Like transport somebody to the Monster Hunter world that the audience can relate to.
Yeah.
You know, which is like not necessarily a bad idea in every case, but it shows a lack of trust in the source material, in my opinion, that they don't think the average moviegoer would be able to connect with a foreign world and a foreign character, right? That is just kind of telling their story through the world. So they have to magically transport these GI Joes right into the monster. Yeah, which I assume is just going to happen with no explanation, like in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then it's just going to be a roller coaster from there. They're just going to be from one monster to the next until the movie's over.
Yeah, well, I don't expect it to have like a deep explanation. It's just going to be some like techno babble, if we're lucky to even get that. But I think you're onto something, Stan. But I think that I would take it a little different route with why they're doing the military thing first. And I wonder if it's because somebody thought that they wouldn't accept Mila Jovovich as like a warrior. So they're like, oh, we need to present her as like a military force, and she's got to have a gun and stuff. So that way the audience can buy that she's this badass. And I can't help but think that that's what was going on with that. And if that's the case, that makes no sense because look at her entire movie career.
Yeah.
That's all she makes, is these types of movies. And she's not bad at it, So
she's an actress who can step out of her boundaries.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe she's talented enough. But seriously, when I look at this movie, like I see the like movie producers just being like going to the director and saying, so can you make a movie that both pleases the lowest common denominator of our audience and Monster Hunter fans at the same time? And he was probably like, no. And they're like, well, make a movie anyways. There you go. And
yeah, like they have to
started.
They have to appeal not only to people who like Monster Hunter and want to see the monsters like, fighting on the screen, but they have to appeal to somebody who's never heard of Monster Hunter before, and they probably weren't confident in having every single character in the movie like just being from the Monster Hunter world. They had to, Alice in Wonderland somebody else into the into the setting so that the audience has somebody to root for, an American person to root for.
And it gives a reason to great exposition for everything. What's that? What's that? Oh my God, what's that? That's a Rathalos.
There's not going to be any exposition. There's not going to be any exposition. It's just going to be her being chased by these monsters the whole movie and like hiding in caves and like trying to fight them and stuff.
I look forward to the explanation as to why their like rocket launcher isn't going to work and they have to pick up like the demon blades instead and like cut the monster up, instead of why their carbine rifles aren't going to be able to penetrate the the monster's hide, but like this longbow, right? That'll do the trick.
Oh
Dude,
yeah,
that
because if you realistically think about it for a moment, if you put like the U.S. military versus these monsters would get destroyed in minutes.
Yes.
the weapons of mass destruction, they're on film right now. And the but you know, I don't know. Like it looks corny and terrible but I don't know, there's something about it where I'm just like, this looks kind of like it might be fun, and that's why I kind of want to see it. It's not going to be a movie that I'll talk about after seeing it. It's
No.
like something you'll go see and then you'll never talk about it again. I'll never rent it again. But it looks fun. It looks like it might be a good time. I mean, dude, the other day on Friday, because I knew we were going to talk about video game movies are bad, I rented the last Resident Evil movie because I was like, I never saw that. I want to watch one video game movie this weekend. So I watched the last Resident Evil movie, and that was a terrible movie, completely terrible. But the same director and the same actress, right? It had moments in it that were just, it made me smile. Like at one point she couldn't get on this motorcycle because she didn't have Umbrella Corporation fingerprints, right? And this guy was laughing like, oh, you're not going to be able to get away. She pulls out a knife and chops his hand off and throws it down on the motorcycle and drives off. I'm easy to please. There's going to be lots of that in this movie where they're going to just like have ridiculous over the top stuff. And it's not going to have a plot. And, you know, I don't know. I feel for people that wanted a Monster Hunter movie to be actually based in the world and to actually develop it. But it's Paul W.S. Anderson. Like, that's not what we're getting.
I think you need to go to Japan for highly accurate, to a fault, movies based on video games.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I've seen some of their stuff, and like it's ridiculously accurate to the point that it looks bad. It's been like they'll wear the costumes that look exactly like they do in the game. They don't try to make them look natural at all. It's like someone bought the costumes from some like cosplay eBay site and just wore it, and they're like, all right, we're making the movie.
Yeah. Well, I want to point one other real quick thing out, because I was in the Marine Corps. Amelia is way too old to be a captain. So it's the third rank in like the officer chain of command. And you hit that like by the time you're like 28 or 30. And she's like in her mid 40s. She could be like a lieutenant colonel. Like,
I don't want to see this movie now. It's inaccurate.
I'm just saying, like, it was bothering me the whole time when they were calling her captain. I'm like,
well, she'll be just playing a younger character, right? Her age in the movie won't be equivalent to
even
her
the way
age.
she looks, like if you look at like any like captains in the Marine Corps, like they all have like very boyish faces, or girlish faces, I guess, you know, because there's obviously both genders, but unless they like transferred from enlisted rank like halfway in their career. Anyways, maybe, I guess I didn't even think of that. Maybe that's what it's going to be. Anyways, I just had to get that out there. Slight tangent, but is there anything else?
Old.
Yeah, she's too old to, she should be retired from the military 20 years. Anyways, is there anything else you guys want to talk about Monster Hunter specifically before we just jump into why are video game movies generally so bad?
It's schlock, but schlock can still be fun to watch. Hopefully it's that type of deal.
Yeah, it'll probably be a good movie for like if you've had a long day or like a long week, right? And you want to just, like you said, turn your brain off and relax and laugh.
Yeah.
Laugh and enjoy some good action. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, let's transition this obviously into the next logical discussion point of, you know, we've seen this so many times where if they're adapting a video game to a movie, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be a very good movie. And at best, it might be tolerable. You know, there's very few examples of there actually being something you wouldn't mind rewatching again. So why do you guys think video games are generally not good movies when it's done?
There's just so many reasons. It's just, I mean, there's no one clear answer, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of answers. Like you can go back to, you can start with one reason, like back in the this is the 80s and 90s in particular, but a lot of games were like old NES games that only had like minimal plot to get you going in the game, and there's little to no source material to go off. So when you're making games like Double Dragon or the Super Mario Brothers movie, you only have but so little to work with. So you're kind of stuck making your own story out of them. And so basically you're making a cruddy action movie and you're just putting small references to the game while you're in there. It's like, or put it like an arcade machine of it in the back. Um
Yeah.
and then there's just the fact that like um there are it's an interactive medium, and sometimes um when you take away that interactive medium from the game and its story, it loses its value and it doesn't translate to video games, or I mean to movies
Yeah.
very well. But I mean, I have plenty other reasons, but what are some you guys think?
I think that what you just hit on the last component, like you said, there's lots of reasons, and I can give, even if you start looking at movies individually, like there's very unique reasons for every movie. But the last point you hit on, that it's just a different medium, is so true, because if you look at, I think that film creators, when they adapt movies, I think that they don't really take into account that the gameplay aspect is such a large percentage of the experience, and they don't try to compensate for the loss of that. Because if you were to make, Breath of the Wild into a movie, well, if you look at the story on paper, that's not a, I mean, it could be an interesting movie, but it's also probably pretty boring. But that's not what people enjoy about the game. It's a part of it, but it's not everything, right? Or how would you recreate Skyrim as a movie and recreate the endless sandbox feel? It's just too difficult to try to do it, and not try to um it's too difficult to try to do it well, I guess, is what I'm trying to get across. So I think that, like, them just not compensating for that loss of element is the biggest problem. And if you look at movies that have done the best, that are not necessarily good movies, but they've been successful, are movies like the Resident Evil franchise, which again are terrible, but they make hundreds of millions of dollars. That's
Mhm.
that's why they do them. Or yeah, I hate to say it, but the early Tomb Raider, the two Tomb Raider movies with Angelina Jolie, those both made huge amounts of money. And I think that that's because somebody took those, like, let's say a Resident Evil, or let's say Tomb Raider. They took that and said, what do people like about these 90s games? What do they like about this? And they probably looked at the games and they said, there's a over hypersexualized woman with giant boobs, big lips, and she's British. She lives in a mansion. She's rich, and it's an Indiana Jones knockoff. And then they said, can we make a movie out of this? Yes. So they made a movie. And if you look at that movie, what's it about? An over hypersexualized woman with big boobs that is an Indiana Jones knockoff that's rich, British, and lives in a mansion. They
Mhm.
they got it very surface level, right? And I think that they did the same thing with Resident Evil movies, where they said, okay, these movies are famous for tension and release. So that's what our movies are going to be about, tension and release. And we're going to have Matrix style like combat. And so people get there's something recognizable about it. And it's very simple, right, for them to emulate that. And unfortunately, it's not as highbrow as I would like, but that's kind of where the movies have been successful, is where they're able to take the same feeling that people had playing the games and emulate that. And unfortunately, some games that's more difficult than others.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And something else like that I think you hit on with the Tomb Raider example is just these movie studios are just looking for something that is popular and has a built-in audience. You know, video game, comic book, based on a book like Hunger Games or something like that, right? Ultimately, they don't see them as like a work of art that they're trying to translate the feeling of playing the game somehow onto the screen. They're taking something that's an established brand or franchise, right, that has a built-in audience, and they're putting it on the screen and trying to get as many butts in the seats as possible.
Yeah.
Like that's what that comes down to. And like I found some examples here, right? So like the Mario Brothers movie came out in 1993. That's coming off the heels of the success of the first Mario Brothers on the NES in 86, and then Super Mario World in 1991, and then boom, we get a movie in 1993. Another one is Street Fighter 2 came out in the arcades and on console.
Mhm.
That game was huge, like back in the early mid 90s. Like that was kind of like the that was like the Fortnite of its time, right? Like that's how big it was. Like people were going to the malls and to the arcades, the bowling alleys, and like playing that game like crazy. There's a movie of it in 1994, right? 2 years after it comes out. Mortal Kombat, the same thing. Game came out in 92. There's a movie of it by 95. And it goes on and on. And here we are, right? Monster Hunter World came out in 2018, even though the franchise has been around since the 90s. And we're just getting a movie of it in 2020. And it's because Monster Hunter World is the first game to really explode in the West, like in the US, where Hollywood is, you know? So all of a sudden it's like it's a profitable venture. And
Hollywood in general has a supreme lack of understanding of the source material in so many ways. And on top of that, they get really bad writers to help with it. Just a few things again. Another thing I find, like, to further expand on the interactive point, that, like I said, there are things that video games do that movies cannot simply replicate. Someone brought up a great example I heard the other day, and the point was with BioShock in particular. That type of game theoretically could be made into a movie, but it would completely lose its themes that it's trying to convey through it. And the whole theme of BioShock is that you are bound to what the game tells you to do, and they symbolize that through the character, I believe it was like Atlas, his name was, I forgot.
Yeah.
Was telling you what to do the entire game.
Yeah, it says,
And
would you kindly, right?
yeah, would you kindly? And when you get to the very end of the game, you find that you've been manipulated this whole time by another person to tell you where to go. And the whole theme is to break away from those bonds and create your own fate. And that was something that was done specifically through an interactive medium. That can't be done.
You can't really capture it.
Yeah. And my last point is, a lot of these video game movie stories are just better made into a TV show.
I agree with
simply
that.
put, I mean, look at Castlevania.
Yeah.
They fleshed that out and made good stories out of it. Now, granted, Castlevania didn't have much of a story in Castlevania 3. So basically, they got someone who has a passion for the source material, and then you got a really good writer on top of it. And look, magic happened with it. So I think it's possible to get it into the realm of this. And you have to look at it this way too. What if The Witcher, with all the stories it has, and like the whole theme of it is that he's traveling the world in searching of one goal, but comes in many stories on the way. Could you make that into a movie? That has to be a TV show. And Netflix realizes this, and they're like, just make into a TV show. And because of that, you're able to flesh out the characters more. It's really hard to flesh out characters in a 2-hour movie that isn't specifically written to be a movie.
Yep.
And like, I remember like the Assassin's Creed movie, I thought that had the potential to be like a contained experience and didn't necessarily have to derive from the video games to make it. Because if you've seen with Assassin's Creed now, they've all been their own contained stories. But because you have to establish the lore of like Abstergo, the DNA, and everything, and you have to make some resolution out of it, you have to cram all of that into a movie. So maybe you could make it a movie trilogy similar to like Hunger Games, but it's just so much that people have to consume to get immersed into that world. And if you don't add that stuff in it, then it's not an Assassin's Creed movie.
Right.
True.
And you might as well call it something else. But then again, you have other movies like Warcraft, which did follow a lot of source material.
Or the Tomb Raider reboot recently, yeah.
Yeah, and it was still mediocre and bad.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, was that even when they follow, and I forgot to bring that up, but when there are movies that follow the source material very closely, like the Tomb Raider reboot that can't happen in 2018, that follows the more modern Tomb Raider more closely, and it's better. It's better.
It's okay.
Yeah,
it was okay. Like it was. I remember almost nothing about the movie other than like the very basic plot line.
You can't forget about Angelina Jolie, man. That's the difference between those and that and this one.
That's true. If it had Angelina Jolie, it would be, yeah. But anyways, but I guess what I'm getting at is, and this is what you were kind of getting at too, Eric, was that there's a component there that provides enjoyment that the filmmaker is not compensating for, when they just make a direct adaptation from the source material as close as that movie followed it. They're not taking into account that the player enjoyed this story because they got to run around. They got to see what was going on. They got to talk to different people and make their own experience. And so in order to compensate for that, they're going to have to flesh the story out more. They're going to have to put more work into it somewhere else to compensate for that.
I agree. That's what they should do. But it seems more often than not, the solution to filling in that void of like the player being able to experience gameplay is just to have huge action set pieces and
here's
off
why.
the wall action happening every 10 minutes.
Here's why. I hate to say this, but I think that Resident Evil in particular, because guys, it's crazy how much money those movies make. I was looking it up online, and their budgets range from like $30 to $60 million, and they'll make like $300 million, like worldwide. They make crazy amounts of money, and the industry, I think, looks at that model and they say, how are we going to make money? Follow that. That's the model. Do it like that, or do it like the early Tomb Raider, where it's, it's kind of cheesy and campy and not serious, and you're going to make a lot of money. And I think that what we need is somebody like a Christopher Nolan, right? Somebody that is like him, that understands the source material, like maybe like we do, or maybe like Mike from Resident Arc does, that's an avid gamer, but knows how to make films also, and is able to adapt it. Because if you saw what they did with The Dark Knight, prior to that, Batman was like something for kids, basically, right? And it was comic books, and then it was something for kids. That was the general consensus among average people. And
there were some like very dark Batman comic books, but it was so niche. That was very few people's exposure to Batman. Yeah,
well, that's a good point. I'm talking about if you were to walk down the road and just ask somebody's general opinion on Batman. Not that it didn't exist or that was the correct outlook to look at it, but most people looked at Batman in like 2000 as something
cartoonish.
Yeah, like I watched when I was a kid, and then they took The Dark Knight and made it mature, right? Because somebody came along and understood the source material and what it meant to people. And while it doesn't follow the comic books necessarily, it understands the message and what like the mature audience really likes about it. And if somebody could come along that understands that about a video game, maybe like The Last of Us or something like that, and is willing to take the Peter Jackson approach and really put in a lot of effort like he did with Lord of the Rings, I think that you could have a phenomenal video game adaptation. But the model right now is either make it completely not about the video game at all, like Sonic or Detective Pikachu, and it'll be a good movie, or just make it a complete cash grab.
I'd argue that they are good video game movies, Detective Pikachu and Sonic the Hedgehog, and I'll argue that the way the writing's really good, because what they do
It's family
is
friendly.
that they are faithful to the source material, but at the same time they make it easy to digest. And good writing, well, obviously good writing, but they make it easy to digest. Like, you can go see Sonic the Hedgehog and you don't need to know about the video game. They establish who Sonic is, what he wants, what his motivations are, what his goal is, and what he's up against. And they just put it all together, and it's written very well. And you fall in love with the character as you go through the movie. You didn't need to play Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, then like pop up like Shadow and Rouge the Bat and be like, oh, I know those characters from that video game. No, they just focus on making, that good movie, and slowly over time they will work characters like Tails in the second movie and introduce him kind of the same way. And with Detective Pikachu, um you establish they at the beginning they established this is a world where these type of creatures and people live together. They set that up, they make it easy to understand. You don't have to play Pokemon to understand what's going on with these movies. You just understand that this is the premise, this is the setup, and like I said, the writing's good. Everyone's motivations and characters are well built enough that it is good as a standalone movie. It does not need to highly depend on its source material to convey to people what is what, and that's the same thing with the Castlevania TV series. I'm sure most people have never played Castlevania 3 on Nintendo before, but you know who Trevor, who Sypha, and Alucard are, and how they're built up throughout the series. Just good writing.
Yeah, I think what they did with the Castlevania series that made it work was they didn't really have a lot of story to work with, and so they compensated for that gameplay by making something that made you feel the same way, right? And they had the same characters there and an art aesthetic that kind of reminded you of the games, and it had a lot of the core themes, but it expanded upon it greatly. So I think that that's why that worked. And I agree with you, Eric. That TV format is entirely the way to go for a lot of this. But the Sonic one, I mean, that works for that type of game because it's family friendly.
Mm-hmm. It's
right?
like an action comedy almost.
Yeah, I think they could have done more of maybe a Pixar route if they wanted to, and put it in like a Sonic world, maybe like, and it would have been something like Nemo or something like that. But I'm fine with what they did. But the thing is, that's a good formula for family friendly movies. But if they were to adapt Metal Gear Solid, right, and Solid Snake's like in your house, and he's like a antsy teenager, right? And they're trying to like, it doesn't work for that type of adaptation because it's a mature story. You can't set him in a new environment, but he would have to be a spy or whatever. You know, he'd have to be a military officer. He can't be,
I don't know,
riding around in somebody's car and like, it's about something completely separate from.
I don't know about that, because if you're making, like you said with your Metal Gear example, you're straying too far from the source material. The thing is with Metal Gear Solid, it has a very specific and particular story set in a very particular place.
Yeah.
Now with Sonic the Hedgehog, he's a little more ambiguous. What I mean by the source material is that they understand the character, they understand what people love about him, and then they put him in this family-friendly type movie that just that works with it. It's not necessarily I mean, there are moments where it's like over the top cartoony, especially with Dr. Robotnik, when set in this like real world type of deal.
Right.
But that is kind of like the over the top nature that like you kind of just, like I said, shut your brain off a little bit and get over. But they still develop the characters very well. They understand that Sonic is like cool, has an attitude, very funny and quirky and stuff like that. They get that right. And something, if you had to adapt a Metal Gear Solid movie, there's already a problem there. There's already a problem unless you set it in a completely different part of the world's lore and story. You're already under the burden of having to adapt video game material, and people are expecting way too high.
I think
of that.
That's why you flesh it out.
You cannot beat the interactive experience.
You do world building with it and tell the same story, but tell it better.
Yeah, I think you could do the first Metal Gear game into a movie because it all takes place in one location, right? Shadow Moses Island.
Right.
Like you could squeeze that into a 2.5 hour, 2 hours if you had to, movie and get all the major plot points, all the major beats, and all the important characters and fit it in there, right? But if you were trying to do Metal Gear Solid 2, that story has like some more locations, and that might be more tricky.
Well, the problem
that might be where you want more of like a miniseries approach.
The problem with Metal Gear also is there's a lot of meta commentary, especially on the video game side of things. Metal Gear Solid 2 is the biggest one. There is so much meta commentary in that it's really hard to try to translate that into a movie. In Metal Gear Solid 1, there's a lot of the game. People make fun of Metal Gear, be like, oh, the cutscenes are so long, it's basically an interactive movie. But really, there's a lot of game related stuff you do, like the 3 key cards. There is the moment where Psycho Mantis is like moving your controller and stuff like that. These are the memorable moments that people remember in Metal Gear. And if you try to convert that to a movie, I just don't think it's going to work well. You can make a Metal Gear Solid movie and go by the bullet points of it for sure, but I think you take away the spirit of why people love it.
That's why you have to do something additional that was not in the game to compensate for the element that you're not able to adapt, right? Because there's elements people enjoy that won't be in the movie. It's not possible. Like you're not going to have a movie that's able to like read your Netflix history and be like, oh, like Sons of Anarchy, huh? It's not going to do that. So you need to have something else there, and maybe they need to make a more compelling story that hits the big beats. But I think that the example with Sonic is that they got the character right, but it was in a different setting. And I don't think that would work for Metal Gear, where they're just going to do a Metal Gear Solid movie with Solid Snake.
I understand what you're saying. You can't do Metal Gear Solid, the first movie, and not have it be in Shadow Moses Island, right? And expect people to just go with it. Like
they're just going to call it would be like calling it Monster Hunter and not being about Monster Hunter, right?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So I think
you could call it Snake's Revenge.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It's not a good idea. So I think that there comes a point where, at that point, if you can't adapt that, it would be better just to not do it at all. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but it would be better to not do it at all. It's not a good idea, anyways. If the option is to do something completely different and call it Metal Gear Solid, than to actually try to adapt it in a way that people would enjoy, I think. I mean, come on, give Christopher Nolan Metal Gear Solid. Tell me he can't do something crazy with it. It'd probably be terrible, but it might be good. I don't know.
It could be good, yeah.
I think my argument at the end of the day is like, I get your point. You can certainly do that, but I think there is too much talking to the player, especially in Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, and 5 to an extent, to really break it away from its interactive experience. Because a lot of times in Kojima's games, he talks to the player in in his stories, like the whole thing with Raiden and Metal Gear Solid 2 is that he was there pretty much to disappoint people who are looking forward to playing Solid Snake.
Hmm.
Like he that was him by design
The
in
original,
there.
the original subvert your expectations. Right?
And like the whole thing with the Patriots is taking control of Raiden as a player. Like you are the player, you are kind of like the Patriots in a way, and you control the actions of Raiden. And that's why at the end of when he has the dog tags in his hands, it's the name that you punched in at the beginning of the game on the dog tags. And he tells himself, I am not to be controlled by someone anymore. I'm going to set my own path now. And he throws the dog tags. I just think to
Spoilers, by the
myself,
way.
how do you? I mean, the game came out in 2002.
Yeah,
you
I know. I just thought I'd
too
throw that
bad.
out there. You know,
Too bad, so sad. But he throws the dog tags in rebellion to what the player wants. And I ask myself, how do you convert that to a movie?
well,
I think you.
go ahead,
I think you
Stan. I've
could do
talked too much.
something like no, like hopefully Kojima would be involved in some way of making the movie, although it's owned by Konami, so probably not. But like the property, the IP is owned by Konami, so if a movie comes out, it's very likely he wouldn't be involved. But you would want somebody who has an understanding of kind of that like talking to the player aspect. And so instead of Psycho Mantis reading your memory card, the Psycho Mantis character, if it is even the same person who's in the movie, can make references to the fact that like somebody's watching them as a movie or something, like, or you can, if the writing is clever enough, you can kind of insert those messages in there, those kind of meta messages, but not have them be so I guess fourth wall breaking that the average moviegoer would just be like thrown out of the film, just like what is this guy talking about, like, so it would take some clever writing essentially to preserve that aspect, but it can't be the same. Like Hat is saying, you have to replace it with something else that's kind of similar or like kind of barking up the same tree, but it's not going to be exactly the same because the medium is different.
Or they could just make a great movie that has the same plot beats and people will just accept that he's not talking to the player, and they'll be disappointed about that. But if it's an exceptionally filmed movie with great cinematography and just great action sequences and like there's great characterization and like great character arcs and like it kind of makes you tear up at the end, people are going to say, okay, it's different from the game, but it's similar in these other ways, and I'll buy it. Like we understand that, Mantis can't talk to me during the movie, So
I think you guys are. I think you guys are bringing up exactly the point I made at the beginning. Like you guys are speculating right now how you take the most important element of a video game and trying to make it into the movie is the interactive part of it. And then you have to ask yourself, how important is that interactive element to you would be willing to take it out and just take the remains of it and make it into a movie?
Well, the thing is, you take the remains of it and then you complete it, right? You put something additional that's not in the game, right?
But is it the same at the end of the day?
Well, here's the thing. Movies into video games has the same problem. Lots of video games based on movies suck. And it's because there's there's something about watching a movie that's not the same as playing a game, right? And the good video games that are based on movies understand that they have to make a good game that's based on the movie. They can't just make something called the movie and it'll be a good experience, right? And I think good films need to understand that they're making films, and you can't just take the video game and act like it's like, okay, well, here's the Cliff Notes and it'll be good. And it's like, no, like Eric's saying that there's something interactive there and that's part of the experience. So
you need some way to emulate it or replace it with something equally good. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. I mean, they did that to round this out with an RPG. CD Projekt Red took great books. They made those into video games, and the video games expand well beyond the books. And that's why it's great. It has awesome side quests in the same spirit of the books, the same philosophy of the books. They just understood it and kept going with it. And it was a very engaging experience. You know, they didn't need to like just tell the book verbatim. They took what was there and then they expanded upon it. And I think that that's how you do it the other way. Unfortunately, people just don't understand that. I mean, unless you want to talk about like, Dragon Quest, Your Story or something like that, which is specifically made.
That's a very weird case movie.
Yeah.
Because they don't give you the actual premise of the movie till the end of the movie.
Yeah. Well, and we're not even touching like all the other terrible, like I don't even consider Rampage or Tetris or making a movie about Tetris. Like that's just doesn't even like fall in the same zone as like Resident Evil to me. At least Resident Evil tried. Like Tetris, you're gonna make a movie about Tetris.
There's an old I don't know how old at this point, Simpsons episode where they're watching TV and a movie trailer comes on for Tic-Tac-Toe, the movie, right? And it like takes place in space and the spaceships are shaped like an X and an O, right? And that's how they adapted it into a film. And then you said Tetris movie and I'm just like, the Simpsons did it again. They predicted the future. You know?
Well, yeah, anyways, I'm sorry, Eric, to cut you off, but
oh no, it's all good. But I do like it when media expands its lore into other media. I mean, sometimes it's done wrong, like FF15, but then you get something awesome like it wasn't the greatest anime ever, but they made an anime adaptation of Devil May Cry. And it wasn't like based off the video games per se, but the idea that Dante is a demon hunter and he goes out and hunts demons, which you can very easily make an episodic TV show out of. And you can just have episodes of Dante encountering, you know, said demon and add a story to it. And it can be like a 30 to 1 hour episode. Then it goes to the next episode and you can have an overall arc in between these episodes. And they did a similar thing with Bayonetta, even though it's like very, very short. Also, they had like an episodic series with her. I think it's pretty, but these are to an extent, depending on the fact that you know the video game already and you just want to watch the extended media of it. But those are times when I feel like it's good to dive into TV show territory, like but again, you have to know the established characters to an extent, to enjoy it.
Yeah, just to tell a side story, right, that runs parallel or kind of adjacent to the other media.
It complements the source material. I guess instead of interpreting it.
Yeah, that's a good approach. Like you see that a lot of times with going from movie to game, like the Star Wars games, right? In all the Star Wars games, there's very few that like follow the events of the films, right? Like beat for beat. They're almost always like filling in some other aspect of the setting or following like a Jedi character who's not in the films, you know, and they can do that because it's such a huge, it's like such a broad setting, like so many planets and places you can go to, right? So that there's lots of different stories they can tell.
Right.
Movies should do the same thing, right? So they should make movies that are not trying to follow the plot of the game, like beat for beat. You know, make like a prequel story or a side story or something like that, and then just make a good film, right? And your hands aren't really tied by having to make sure like Psycho Mantis is in there somehow, right? you can just make like a good movie.
Yeah,
and,
it needs to
place it in the setting of the game world.
It needs to be. I think like if you're going to adapt something that's famous for its stories, though, that you would need to. I wouldn't like it if they did something completely separate. I mean, I would watch it, but I think that it still would need to end in the same place, you know, with the same sequence. Like it would have the same plot, but the meat of the plot would be something that they could tweak or change, right? To add further characterization and just further, you know, character arcs and just they can add additional scenes and stuff, but I would be, disappointed if, for example, there was talk of, not with Square Enix, but there's a lot of people that want a Netflix Final Fantasy VI series. And that would be awesome. I would buy that, or I would watch that in a heartbeat. But if they just went left field with it and it wasn't even Final Fantasy VI, it was just a good movie with like Magitech armor, I mean, I would watch it because it's a good movie or a good series, but it would still need to hit the major events, I think, to be identifiable.
If it was me and if they were going to do that and I knew the source material of Final Fantasy VI and I was pitching it to Netflix,
right,
I'd say like, let's do a prequel that's like the War of the Magi, which is like an important event in the lore of Final Fantasy VI. But then I don't have to storyboard my entire 8-episode miniseries to all the major events of the game. I can tell the story that comes before the game, and then I'm also not kind of handcuffed and having to have all the same characters that are in the.
I know where you're going because we talked about this a little bit with the Harry Potter game and then Knights of the Old Republic, where they chose to do a prequel, so therefore they get to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said about that, but I think that if they were making a film or television adaptation of something I really loved and I wanted to see it on film, I would be very disappointed if I didn't at least get that first thing first, right? That I'm not getting the adaptation, I'm getting something else. Whereas, their Knights of the Old Republic is the second thing that came out, right? I already had the Star Wars movies and, Harry Potter. Well, I already got the books and the movies. So the fact they're making a prequel, cool. Or not even a prequel. It's like 100 years before, but I could see where you're going. Maybe I would just have to see how it came about, but.
Well, it's a safer approach, right? Because then you don't have as many expectations and kind of guidelines like that you have to follow, which if you're trying to adapt a game into a movie or a TV miniseries, like breaking down some of those guidelines might be necessary for, budgeting or runtime issues. So
that's a good point though, because video games are generally designed with gameplay in mind. And there's certain things that would not adapt well, right? Like if you were to make a Final Fantasy VII live action movie, people would be wondering why Cloud is using a sword when people are shooting guns at him. Or you're making an Uncharted movie. Like, does there really need to be so much climbing? Right. But there's so much climbing in the game because it's a game, right? Or like, how many freaking tombs have we gone in? Jesus Christ. In a movie, right? Well, it's because it's a game. That's why we have all those tombs. And you can't, you would have to take some kind of, you would have to modify it for sure. That's true. I agree with that.
Yeah. Because somebody might be like, oh, they cut out my favorite tomb. 4 out of 10 movie, like.
Oh, there's always going to be that. Yeah. There's the one guy on the internet that says James Bond Casino Royale is not a good movie. And, there's always going to be, that's probably the same guy that would make the same comment about the tombs. Anyways.
But speaking of one quick thing,
sure.
If we're talking about tie-ins, one big thing I can recommend to people, if you're a Star Wars fan, Shadows of the Empire, the game they released on the N64, was actually part of a big media project, which we were talking about, like tie-ins for movies that return to games that have the characters featured and stuff. Shadows of the Empire is a great example of that. And if you just type into YouTube Shadows of Empire the movie, what people have done is they have mixed the book, the video game, and the comics together, which are 3 separate medias that are all part of the same story, and successfully put them all together.
Wow.
And it's really great to watch. It takes place between The Empire Strikes Back and the end of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And I think that's something really worth looking into, or play the game. But that's an example of like the media being interpreted great from the source material. I know it's a little bit off tangent, but dude, Stan brought that topic up. I'm like, oh yeah, Shadow of the Empire was something like that.
That's a lot of work to put all those media together into something cohesive and understandable.
Oh yeah, it's
Dude,
that's great. I think I have one in my library.
I used to think about that when not that specific example, but when I was a younger, I used to think about like great 2-part like Star Trek episodes that I really liked. Like, man, this could be a movie. It's an hour and a half. And then I'd sit there and think like, well, what if I edited out like the beginning part of it and just made it one movie, and then my mind would just get going and think, well, then I could like edit other parts of other episodes that would fit into it and make it a longer movie. And like it would just start making it into this grand like 2-hour adventure. And yeah, I never did that.
Man, you can't have it that way. You got to have the to be continued at the end of it. That's all dramatic. That's like dun 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 dun.
That's terrible for Netflix because I could just click the next one.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it's like, well, you didn't anticipate that. Now, did you? 1987.
And you can always tell when they're going to commercial too. It's like, oh nope, oh we're back. Look at
that. Yeah.
Anyways. So yeah, that's somehow that's what we think about bad video game movies.
I mean, seriously, that can easily be a 9 to 10 hour conversation. There's so many reasons video game movies are bad. It's just like you can make a full documentary out of it. It's insane.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. One last thing that I found while I was researching about the Monster Hunter World movie, which might be a way to wrap this up. The director Anderson, right? He was quoted recently saying the success of the most recent game of the series at the time, Monster Hunter World, which was developed by Capcom in early 2018 for a worldwide release rather than a limited Japanese release, like many of the previous games, led many film distributors to seek out potential for a Monster Hunter film, only to discover that he had already locked up the rights with Capcom about a year prior.
The game coming out?
Yeah, no, like the film distributors and executives saw that there was some game called Monster Hunter World that sold like 10 million copies in 2018 and said, you go get the film rights for that.
Yeah.
Like,
well, if clever sons of bitches.
Yeah, like most of the people who are in charge of making these film adaptation movies, they're in it for the money. They're in it to make a quick buck.
Well, if you think about it, though, I mean, in that like niche genre, right, of video game movies, like that, Paul W.S. Anderson and Mila Jovovich are like top tier for terms of like making money. Yeah. And so when you want like cream of the crop, like guaranteed success, like it's not Oscar award winning movies, but like that's just the people they know to go to, because this is probably going to make them like several $100 million on a global release, because like that's just an easy thing for them to do, right? They just saw it and saw, okay, there's monsters, you hunt the monsters. Mila hunts big monsters in Resident Evil. I mean, it just makes sense.
Now, is it going to be in movie theaters, or is it going to be only on demand?
In movie theaters, apparently, in December.
Yeah,
we'll see if they delay it on demand. Yeah.
Because I won't be able to help but laugh and comment at it. So
I'll get the T-virus.
I gotta watch at home.
Well, I'm not watching this movie. I'm just joking, guys. But I am gonna go see it. I'll wear a mask in between my popcorn, and it'll be great. So,
with a big old Rathalos mask, and you just put the popcorn inside the mask.
Just pull it back and just start doing it and plop it up. Yeah. It'll be great. It'll be a great time. Hopefully, I don't know, I'm sure. Anyways, tangent. So yeah, I think that's going to wrap up this week's podcast. Has some good topics this week. Hopefully we will have something, some big news drop this week, and it'll give us something additional to talk about. But let us know what you all think in the comments about the Fire Emblem game, about the Monster Hunter trailer, and also why are video game movies generally bad. And I'd be curious if you all think that there is a movie that is not bad and what that movie is. So definitely let us know about that. But that will wrap us up for this week. We'll catch you all next week. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
See you next time.